We're live.
Welcome, everyone. It's so good to see you in 2021. Thank you for tuning in again to Leaders Over Lunch, our series here at the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts, where we have candid discussions, typically with a leader. But today we brought you an incredible opportunity to listen, learn, and also ask questions of four of our most dynamic leaders here in this region. I'm Keith Motley. I typically, as you know, serve as Chancellor Emeritus and a distinguished professor at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. But today I humbly serve as consultant president and CEO of the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts. And I'm also serving as co-host with my co-host, the chairman of the board of the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts, attorney Joseph Feaster Jr. You're going to hear from him in a moment. Now, audience, I want to remind you, there is a question and answer feature. And I know you're saying, every time you tell us that, you never get to it. We're getting better and better and better at that. I might want to bring less engaging guests, and then you could ask questions all day. But the fortunate thing is we've gotten guests here that answer those questions before you're even able to ask them. I want to thank the staff before we get started. They always help put this event together. Natalie Haywood, Alvin Peters, Uder, we affectionately call Neil Uder, and also William Watkins, who is producing this show today. It's an hour-long show. We invite you to enjoy lunch, enjoy the conversation, and we want to thank you for joining us today. I am so grateful that our esteemed guests are with us. Now, Leaders Over Lunch. It's a conversation with men and women in leadership and business, government, community development, religion. We have these candid conversations about our strengths, our weaknesses, our threats, and most of all, we talk about our opportunities. That is important to us. It's important to us as a community. Our guests today are Dr. Yvonne Spicer, who happens to be the mayor of the great city of Framingham. We're so grateful to be able to have Dr. Spicer in with us today. Also, we have our city councilor, and someone I'm extremely proud of, from the town of Randolph, Katrina Huff-Larmond. Thank you for being here. I see you. I'm so proud of you. You two have been doing just incredible work serving our communities. Segun, Idowu, thank you, man. Executive Director of the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts, but someone who has been getting into all of the rooms, trying to make it accessible for us as a business community, as a community throughout the Commonwealth and beyond, and has been an incredible convener during this time. And also someone that I'm extremely proud of as well, Imari Jeffries, who's the executive director now of King Boston, among the other things that he's doing here in the city. We were talking before we came on the air about all the interconnectedness. And so while there's lots of that here, I also must admit that our chairman and my co-host was the first person that I saw as an undergraduate student who was going on to graduate school while he was in law school at Northeastern. He modeled excellence for us. And I'm so grateful to be able to co-host today with Joseph Feaster Jr. Chairman Feaster.
Thank you very much, dear Dr. Motley. It's always a pleasure. Thank you to our guests, this esteemed panel. I always like to say it reminds me of Morning Joe. I think maybe we have to change the program to that when you have such an esteemed group such as this. I don't want to get up that early, but in terms of this noontime hour, it's a great time in which to have it. I'm really excited about this opportunity because like the Dr. Motley, Dr. Spicer, who is the first mayor of Framingham. Now that she has so many firsts, first Black, first mayor of once they created from the town of Framingham to the city of Framingham, a Black woman, and also my fellow Delta sister. Katrina Huff-Larmond, when they changed over in Randolph to their form of government, I believe Katrina initially was at the school committee and then went to the council. I believe I'm correct on that, but I may be wrong, and you can correct me, Katrina, but I know I met you in so many ways there. And of course, Segun and Imari, the work you're doing. Segun is doing extraordinary work at BECMA. Imari was just on so many programs, is truly viewed as a leader in so many different ways as to what he's doing with King Boston. And we're going to get a chance to talk about that. So let me just put a framework, and then Dr. Motley and I are going to go back and forth with all of you and from the standpoint, because this program is really talking about, we know the national issues and the things that have occurred. Those are all great, but the reality is we want to see how things will work from the bottom up, from those of us here who are locally, who are in the business of doing things, and how we're going to model what is going on in the national, whereas it can benefit the issues that we're concerned about. So the conversation today is really, what are the great things that you're doing? What are the things that you see can be done as far as what you're doing in order to complement what hopefully we will see as some positiveness going on in Washington, D.C. So we have the political folks, we have folks talking about business, we have folks talking about our culture. So I'm just going to take the liberties to be able to go. I got to go to, my first Black mayor for the city of Framingham, and say, Dr. Spicer, with that intro, you are free to roam. and the fashionist, in response to that, what are you doing in your role as the mayor, which will complement the types of things that we hope to see going on in Washington?
Well, first and foremost, I want to say thank you for this generous invitation, and it's so great to see Dr. Motley again. And we go way back, and and truly, since being here in Boston, learning about all of the excellence in this state, and particularly within the African American community. And as the first mayor of this wonderful city, and the first mayor that has ever been popularly elected, a Black woman that has been popularly elected in the entire state, there's a lot of weight on these shoulders, but I also stand on the shoulders of so many of my ancestors and other women that have come before me. And so I bring all of that with me to this job as the first mayor of this city that is 70,000 plus. We are a diverse city. We have roughly about 30% people of color that live in Framingham, and the African American community is quite small. It's only about 5 or 6%. And part of that is looking at how we first begin to learn to be a city. And that's something that's very unique. Who gets to start a brand new city? And with that comes its own set of challenges of moving from a town form of government to a city form of government with a strong mayor and a city council. And that is the form of government we have here in Framingham. And so since I became mayor, I really operated with 5 pillars. And it's very similar to looking at what President Biden is laying out, thinking about economic development, investing in our people. How do we have a smooth transition from town to city? Looking at ways to preserve our environmental spaces. And last but not least, and near and dear to my heart, is how do we invest in our people? And that is something that I've looked at very carefully, is that all of the initiatives that we put forward, whether it's housing, we've got new housing in Framingham. We are working very closely with entities that are looking at our transportation system and ways to improve that. Thinking and foremost about police brutality and police reform. I declared racism a public health crisis in the city of Framingham, as well as signed an executive order with our former police chief to look at the use of force and how do we proceed as a police department. Most recently, I'm very pleased. I hired our very first African-American police chief in the history of the city of Framingham. And moving the needle. Yes, yes, he does it. Chief Lester Baker is our new chief, and he's hit the ground running and looking at ways to attract more women. I also work very closely with our police department to move us out of civil service, and we are out of civil service. Effectively last week, it was signed by the legislators, and we are out of civil service, which gives us an opportunity to hire a more diverse workforce that looks like our police department, to build training programs, to hire very differently than we had to under the civil service law. So, these are just a few of the things that I have moved forward, and also utilizing my background. I have a background in science and engineering and STEM, and seeing how that helps me solve problems within my community. And yes, we have challenges like a lot of other communities. We've been working on those things, but I also would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge how this pandemic has caused us to pivot in a way and grow in a way that we never thought was possible. And we are doing it. And I do see that light at the end of the tunnel. The vaccine is available. And it has definitely hurt, particularly our senior population and our communities of color. So, this work, I'm in it 24/7. I love being the mayor of the city. And every day is a challenge, and a challenge that I think all of my professional background has prepared me very well for. And just like an engineer, I solve problems one day at a time. So, I'll stop there for now, but just know that being in this work, knowing the value of this work, but also knowing the value of the support network around me, other mayors and town managers, it has been phenomenal, and I'm grateful for that. So, and including my dear friend Marty Walsh, who is headed on to bigger and brighter things, and we wish him well. But I do know that having that network has been pivotal in this role.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'm going to bounce it to Dr. Motley. I'm sure he's going to want to go to Councilwoman and to follow up on that presentation, but I'll leave that to Dr. Motley's discretion.
Well, yes, we're going to go to our Councilwoman, but I just wanted to let our mayor know that investing in our people, that's a great takeaway from what I heard you say. To our Councilwoman.
Hello, everyone. Thank you as well for the invitation to be here, to have lunch with you all, and to talk about some of the work that we're doing in Randolph. So first of all, I would say that I was never on the school committee, but that's okay. I started with being on boards, but not the school committee. And then this is my third term as council in Randolph. So I'm saying that just to clear it up, but to also say that I am the first woman of color to be at the table at Randolph, which is amazing. And we talk about leadership all the time, so it's amazing, but and the shoulders that you stand on, but the other piece that unfolds for those who are the first is that there isn't a map. Right there isn't a map, like you're making it up as you go along. Mm-hmm. And you're trying to pull in mentors and anyone that you can. So I appreciate that, but I also know how being the first has an extra set of, that will give someone ambition. So yes, some of Randolph and some of the things that we're doing, and thinking about COVID, I have I have 9 colleagues, and there are 3 Black people on the council. And so one of my other colleagues, Councilor Clifton, and I, when COVID first started, well, we know COVID was here before it was recognized, but when it became recognized, Randolph being a majority minority community, I don't like that majority minority term, but it sells what I'm talking about. So we have at least, African American, 11%, no, African American 15%, white 9%, and then we have a large population of immigrants in the town. So what you can imagine, that language is always an issue. And so it's interesting, and it's important to understand what you bring to the table. And before I do each presentation, even before I teach, because I also teach in college, I pray. And today it was interesting that my prayer was, thank you for allowing me to be at the table. Thank you for allowing me to be a change agent, because that's exactly what's happening in Randolph. I wish I had these wonderful stories as the mayor. I mean, I'm not saying that things are not moving along, but we do understand it's a struggle. We understand that people who were in power are not interested in giving up their power. So there are barriers each step that we take. And as Black people, and you could imagine, if there are more folks of color in town, should there be less barriers? One would hope, one would think, but that's not the case. It's not the case at all, where we continue to fight for the rights and be at the table for those who look like us and for those who need the services. Again, language is always an issue. And it wasn't until recently, was sitting down with town council and town manager and talking about, we need to have more documents in multiple languages. Even when COVID hit, the town's way of dealing with it was, let's put this information on Facebook. On Facebook? What you mean put this information? We need to inform the community what is going on. So myself and another counselor, we just took it upon ourselves to make sure that we were getting the information out there to folks. We had a multilingual COVID Zoom meeting. And we also were able to put some initiatives together to make sure that that information got out there. And we knew that was important because we knew others were not going to think about this, and why others were not thinking about this, and it's a lack of importance, lack of understanding of the needs of what people need who are in these oppressed groups. So that's what we're dealing with ongoing. And I am so pleased to hear about your chief. We are working on trying to figure out this civil service program and how we could also get out of that program, because currently our chief is retiring this year. And there are only two or three people who are able to take his position. And none of them look like us, and none of them are identified as female. So we're in a position where we say, why we keep going to the same well? And we continue going, knocking down the doors, being at the table, talking to, our colleagues, talking to the town manager, on how we can make a change. So we're in the middle of making changes. Things are happening. We just heard today with the vaccine that we will have the vaccine in Randolph, and we will have more than enough for our seniors. That's good news. That's good news that's happening in Randolph. But where did that come from? And I just emailed my colleague this morning and I said, I would like to think the work that we do during the beginning of COVID, of making people pay attention to us in Randolph, making Randolph a testing site. Why would Randolph not be a testing site where we have the majority of folks of color in this town, and the majority of folks who are being affected by COVID are folks of color? It doesn't make any sense why this isn't a testing site. So those are some of the battles. Those are some of the opportunities and things you can do when you're at the table. And there's so much more that I could talk to, and I will talk about and will talk about, but that's just a little bit of why it's so important for us to be at the table.
Well, thank you for that. Go ahead, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Katrina. Well, maybe I want to get you on the school committee after you finish your tenure as city council, because I know that you could bring great, and also as a college teacher, you could bring some stability to what's going on in Randolph. I am on the Paul Fernandez Foundation, your predecessor on the city council and your colleague on the city council. So I've been intimately involved with from time to time in Randolph, and I won't be using this as a platform to get a job over there, but at least I'll let you know that I am familiar with what goes on in Randolph. But I want to just shift for a minute. I have two great remaining folks to talk about what they do, but I want to move to our cultural side. I want to look at, because again, we are cultural people. Our history depicts that. It certainly has, we've endured a lot over 400 years in this nation. We just celebrated, with the great leadership of William Watkins and others, the 1619 Project. And Imari Paris is just taking the whole King Boston piece to a whole nother level. I just recently had him speaking at on behalf of the Breakfast Group, and he just mesmerized them. And I hope that as a result of that, the millions of dollars are continuing to flow into his coffers. And I'm sure the same will be for Segun when we get to him, as far as what he's doing at BECMA. But Imari, can you please tell this viewing audience or this listening audience what you are doing, how you are doing, what's your plans for the King Center, and how you're looking at placing your institution into the gateway to Roxbury?
Well, it is great to see you twice in such a period of time, Uncle Joe, Mr. Feaster, and my mentor, big brother Keith Motley. It's an honor to be a part of this esteemed group, Mayor, Councilwoman, and Segun. I said that last, not least, because Segun's a neighbor, so he knows where to find me. It's an exciting time to do this work, and King Boston has emerged in this moment. And I would say it's a result of this third reconstruction that we are in the midst. And so I think our two elected leaders on this Zoom, Ayanna Pressley emerging nationally, Rachel Rollins as our DA, are two top cops in Boston, both our sheriff and our police chief. Our city council in Boston, there's been an emergence of elected and civic leaders that have shifted and pivoted as a part of this third reconstruction. And I think King Boston, as a civic organization, is a result of this momentum that was already in place. And thinking through what a third reconstruction means for Boston, it's political, it's social, and it's economic. And so I think our elected officials are a part of this political wave, and I think it's up to Segun and I to do our part on the social and the economic. And so King Boston is a part of that piece. It's I'm saying it's a holy trinity of work. It's the Embrace Memorial, which is a 22-foot memorial honoring Dr. and Mrs. King, as well as Boston civil rights leaders in Boston Common, which is our country's oldest park. It's an important piece. It's the financial heart of Boston. The second part of this holy trinity is the King Center for Economic Justice in Nubian Square, which is both the geographic center of Boston and the heart of Black Boston. It is these 2 points in the map mark the trek of the 1965 Freedom Rally. And so towards the end of Dr. King's life, before he was assassinated, he pivoted to incorporate other campaigns, and one of the campaigns existed in Boston, where organizers, local leaders marched from Nubian Square to roughly the same spot where we're building the memorial. And so we are honoring the 1965 Freedom Corridor by building something in Nubian Square and building something in the Common. And then the last piece is Embrace Ideas. And so we know that part of this new discourse on anti-racism has to not only be about policy, research, data, and organizing, it also has to be about Black joy, Black love, Black safety. And there's no better way to articulate a message of Black joy, love, and safety through dialogue centered around reconstruction, reconciliation, reparation, truth, through music, arts, et cetera. And so Embrace Ideas is the arts, the ideas, the equity South by Southwest part of King Boston. And so we imagine starting that last week. We kicked it off with Dr. King's Holiday, but really we see a week-long festival once we unveil the Embrace in 2022, and BECMA is part of our partners on that, saying that Boston is opening. Boston is going to be the most anti-racist city in America. You know, one of the things that I think we imagine at King Boston, the Kings met here while they were college students. Boston is the 4th largest college town in America. The other college towns marker the population sizes of those cities. So New York is the biggest college town, LA is number 2, Chicago's number 3, Boston's number 4. It's the 9th largest city, 4th largest college town. The Kings were a part of this college town wave that came to Boston. That's where they met. And so in an alternate universe, Boston was a safe place. Boston was a welcoming place for Black folks. Boston was a place where Black folks could thrive. And the Kings decided to come here to go to college and stay here. And Boston became the epicenter of Black and national civil rights movement. So that universe didn't happen. But 56 years later, we have that opportunity to do it again. And so, you know, the folks on this Zoom are part of King's legacy. We carry those values as Black folks in our DNA and in our bones. And so I imagine that when we vote for our next mayor, one of the questions that we'll ask is, what would it take for Boston to be the most welcoming city for Black folks in the country? How do we move from number 9 behind Charlotte to number 1 in front of Atlanta? And so what are the political, the economic, the social, the academic, the educational, the housing, all those things that are part of a reconstruction that it will take for Boston to move from number 9, the bottom of the unfriendliest large cities, to number 1. And so King Boston is focused on that through research, ideas in humanities, and the memorial.
Segun?
Yes, sir. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be here. I'll repeat what all others have said, that it's a pleasure to be able to, first of all, have been invited by the Urban League, which is such an important institution in our community, for stabilizing the economic well-being of all Black residents here in the Commonwealth. But of course, to be able to be here not only with Mr. Feaster and Dr. Motley, but with my mayor, even though I'm a Boston native, but someone who I adore and support very much, Dr. Spicer and her work in Framingham. And it's a pleasure to be here with the councilwoman as well, who meeting you for the first time, but I'm looking forward to, after we all get the vaccine, being able to meet and greet and eat with you in person and share. And then, Imari, who's down the street from me and who I see all the time. But great to be here with everybody. He's doing great work, and happy that to call him a partner. So here at BECMA, some of the work that we're doing, I'll give the 30-second spiel in 90 seconds of what we do and what we plan on doing. BECMA was formed about 5 years ago in 2015 as the result of a now famous report that we all know of, the Color of Wealth in Boston, which had that famous and startling statistic, even for those of us who live it, the fact that the racial wealth gap here in greater Boston, that the median net worth of the Black family was $8, and that of the white family was $247,500. And I saw a question earlier about why Black people are more reactive than proactive. But what I will say is, in this particular instance, again, as someone who grew up in Boston, it was a time where I saw the opposite of that narrative of Black people being reactive, but instead being proactive. The fact that we saw this statistic after many, many years of pushing against policies that were going to negatively impact our community by folks on this call, by folks like Mel King and others, to ensure that we had a stable community. The fact that that statistic was still a reality made a lot of people upset and concerned about the future of Black Boston and Black Massachusetts. And so there was a huge meeting over at Prince Hall, over in the Grove Hall area of Boston, where about 700 people came out not to talk about the problem, not to bemoan and weep and gnash at the teeth and say, oh, this is terrible, but instead to determine how do we attempt to correct this grave injustice against our community. And one of the things that came out of that and subsequent discussions was the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts, which now serves as the chief advocate for the over 2,000 Black firms located here in the Commonwealth that employ 14,000 people and contribute billions of dollars to the state economy, as well as the over 20,000 sole proprietor-owned Black firms, Black businesses here in the Commonwealth. And so, everything we do falls into three buckets, and I'll just go through this very quickly because I want to make sure we get to the rest of the questions that you all have for us. But the first is the work that we do on the state level to advocate for these businesses, for our community, to ensure that policies are being enacted that help to grow opportunity for our communities and to ensure that we have access to capital and other resources to build wealth in our community. One of the things that we want to make sure is one of our chief focuses, not just the political aspect, which was raised, was important, not just the cultural aspect, which is extremely important, but also the financial and the economic aspect, which helps to seed a lot of these things that we're talking about today. Second piece is convening important conversations like we're doing right now for this Leaders Over Lunch, ensuring that all of these things, all of these conversations we have, that we're focused on solutions, not talking about the problem, because as Black people, we know the problem, we live the problem, we understand the problem, and we also know the solutions. And so we want to make sure we're highlighting solutions and people and organizations who are contributing to those solutions. And finally, the biggest piece, this is why our membership continues to grow, the connections that we make for our business members. So we connect our businesses to capital, to technical assistance, to one another, to foster this ecosystem of Black businesses using Black businesses, but also connecting our business members to contract opportunities. I grew up in this city, and I got to tell you, I've been hearing the same arguments made against the city, the state, other cities and towns in the Commonwealth of not doing business with our people. And I'm ashamed that I, as leader of this organization, have to continue to make those same assertions and those same arguments that we're not doing right by our businesses. And so I have been incredibly proud of the work that my team has been doing, which I'm happy to be able to say, because when I took over BECMA, it was just myself. And now by the end of this month and at the beginning of February, we'll be able to announce that there are 6 of us now working at BECMA to carry forth the mission that the Board of Directors has put together for us. But I'm proud of the fact that we have been pushing the city of Boston, not only to recognize that we were doing less than 1% of our spending with minority-owned businesses, which meant non-white businesses, but that we have moved us to a place of putting policies and practices in a place that will ensure that we are directing business to our firms, as well as pushing on the state level. At the beginning of 2020, we called out Governor Baker and the Baker administration for a report that showed that less than 1% of their spending was going to Black firms in particular, and we didn't hear anything back. But because of a coalition that we were able to build, we met with the governor again in October, and the governor fulfilled everything that we called for because of the fact that COVID is certainly impacting our businesses at a monumental rate compared to others. 20% of minority businesses are closed as a result of COVID. 11% of those are Black. But we know that the health of the Commonwealth's economy is due to the health and well-being of the Black economy. And so making this argument and ensuring that our political leaders and others understand that we need to ensure that the health and well-being of our communities, if we want to thrive as a Commonwealth, is important. That's what's been helping to move us forward. And I'm happy to be able to support our sisters in politics here to advance that understanding. And I'll just say, for 2 seconds, I just want to shout out, Imari did this a little bit already, to shout out the Black women who are leading, because you heard from the 2 who are on this call that they are the first. And in a lot of cases in this state, the first Black person we have in many positions is a Black woman. And I just want to acknowledge the fact that Black women continue to lead in many, many spaces here in the Commonwealth. And I'm particularly proud of the fact that they are leading and overcoming the monumental challenges in the political space and are helping to push the Black agenda forward. So I'll end right there.
Well, I see that you're learning a valuable lesson. Acknowledge our Black women every time you get a chance. And thank you all for your incredible words. And also thank you for going into the question and answer profile and answering those questions as part of your comments. And so you've given us a lot of alarming data and statistics and all those kinds of things around all the disparities that are happening in our communities. What can we do to work together to deal with some of that? What suggestions do you have for us as a community? How do we work together to, sort of impact that? Anybody?
Well, I'll for 2 seconds, I'll just say that over the summer, in response to the lynching of George Floyd, BECMA and about a dozen or so Black and Indigenous-led organizations, including King Boston, came together to form what's known as the Black Mass Coalition. And one of the things that we did was develop something called the Blueprint, where we put together 35 different targets for 5 different sectors. So the private sector, nonprofits, the philanthropic organizations, and the state and local government, and identify different ways for them to begin to address systemic racism here in the Commonwealth. Because in Massachusetts, we like to think that because we have the 54th, that we are somehow devoid of sin when it comes to racism, because we, and so anyway, we wanted to make sure we were addressing racism in various ways. I invite folks to visit becma.org/blackmass to see that list of ways we can address it. I'll just highlight a few. One was developing a $1 billion fund that would invest in many different facets of Black life here in Massachusetts, to invest in wealth creation for Black communities, pushing for a public bank that would invest in our communities, and a whole host of other things. So there are a variety of ways to address systemic racism here in the Commonwealth. And again, we invite folks to visit that blueprint to see how we can work together to address that.
I'll jump in because I think a lot goes right back to the core of our foundation, and that's education. And that has been denied. And when you have educational opportunities, you have a leg up and an opportunity to move in different directions. I mean, whether it's economic, whether it's politics. I also say service, because, all of us that are out here in political spheres right now, we started somewhere, whether it was serving on a board or a commission or someplace, and getting involved. And that's the one thing that even as the mayor of this city, I have worked very hard to get more people of color from diverse neighborhoods, particularly that have underrepresented neighborhoods, on boards and commissions. And that has been a very deliberate thing that I have done. I've also hiring practices. There's a policy that you have to demonstrate how you reached out to a diverse community in terms of hiring new people for jobs, because once again, it's about institutional and systemic racism that keeps others out. And I, when I first started as mayor in 2018, I looked at what was the percentage of people of color that worked in municipal government, and 91% of the people that worked in Framingham were white. 91%. Mm-hmm. That number has shifted. I've shifted that paradigm, but we're still not where we want. We're now, it's probably in the 80s, somewhere around mid 80s, 85%. But that is also realizing that representation matters. It also changes the paradigm, and it also shares the power and the economic opportunity for growth. And that's where I come back to the investment in businesses too. How do you continue to support economic growth within the communities? So people are not leaving their communities, but they're staying in their communities and reinvesting back into the community. And that is something, once again, I go back to my science and tech engineering background, looking at jobs for our young people that are going to be career aspirational, ways in which they can earn a living and be able to live, work, and play in their own communities. And that's something that we need to come back to, because when you start to look at all of the dynamics, especially here in Massachusetts. You know, once again, we're not a large cadre of people, but we're a powerful voice of people, and utilizing that position in power to elevate others. And that's what I do as the mayor of the city, is how do I elevate other people? And create not only a seat at the table for them, but bring another folding chair for a bunch of other folks and keep that pipeline moving. And that's critically important. But once again, starting with education, making sure our children know the value of an education. And the more you know and the more you can navigate, the easier it is for you to do a lot of different things.
I want to say the organization, you know, and there was something like, this is the year of coalition. That's what I've been hearing. This is the year of coalition. So coalitions are starting all over the place. But we're going to take that back to our history, because we were always organized, whether it was anti-slavery movement, the suffrage movement, civil rights, we've always organized. So we could just get back to our roots. I like how you said it. Let's get back to our roots and let's start organizing and understanding and naming the problems. Again, I like how you said we know what the problems are, but what are the solutions? And putting these solutions together. Last night we had a meeting at a council meeting, and we have a redevelopment committee. And one of the issues that came up, that they want to build these businesses. So we talked about what kind of relationships do you have with organizations that help Black businesses? Again, Randolph is a town, majority, minority, but there's less support in Randolph for folks of color. So are you reaching out to bring in resources? Because as we know, that was mentioned earlier, the first businesses, especially in COVID, that have been closing shop are businesses of color and women businesses. The first businesses that are closing shop. So what are we doing so we can support those businesses? And how we getting the message out about the commissions and the boards and the jobs? I want to say, Dr. Motley, right now, there's a job available at your city hall. And I want to tell people, because I think this is what we're supposed to do. There's a clerk position that's available at Stoughton Town Hall or City Hall, your city, right?
Yep.
City Town
No,
Hall.
we're town.
Town hall,
We're
town hall.
town.
Oh, town hall.
I was saying, yes, the job is available.
So this is the message that we have to get out to people. Let people know what opportunities are out there. That's one thing that I'm not quite sure if we're not doing it well because we don't know it. I'm not quite sure if we're not doing it well because we don't understand our responsibility in doing this. And I believe there's a huge responsibility on our shoulders, especially the ones who are sitting at the table, to get this information out. I like the reactive or proactive.
Right.
And I wonder sometimes when we're talking about Black folks or folks of color being proactive, are we so used to just reacting? So that has always been part of our makeup. We react. Someone comes for us, we're going to come for you. But we're not always, we can handle it, but we're not always so prepared for it. And why is that? That's part of our history, that we have always been in those situations. So I do think there's part of us in our community, we have to be more prepared. And some of that preparedness comes with being educated. And I hear you with the youth. I developed a youth council here in Randolph, where it's all about leadership, honing in on the leadership of youth and molding them. Because my idea is, if we pay attention to our youth in town, then they will come back to be the leaders. That's what I want them to do. I want our youth who grew up in Randolph to come back here and be the town manager or sit on the board or make some significant changes that we have. So I'm investing as much as I can in the youth in hopes that it will definitely pave a direction for our future.
Absolutely.
Folks, we have about 15 minutes. I know, Imari, I'm going to give you an opportunity in order to speak about it. We knew that this was going to happen, that Dr. Motley and I could just sit back and do this. I do have a question, Imari. I'm going to let you respond to Dr. Motley's question. Then I have a question for the panel. What I'm going to do is act like the judge. I'm going to come in and clip you in terms of the time, in terms of your response for the short time we do have. But Imari, why don't you respond to Dr. Motley's question? I'm sure you have a response.
Yeah, I think this idea of us working in parallels of both active and reactive has been, I think a conversation that's been on, at least, I know that's not the question, but just responding to that's been on a lot of our minds. I think the Black Mass Coalition and that document and the work that we've been doing there has been one place where we've tried to be proactive. And I think with the work through BECMA has pushed a lot of things forward. I think one of the other things that Segun and I are working on is, and I see it was one of the questions, this idea of reparations. And so, we have been using the National Coalition of Blacks in Reparations and COBRA's framework of reparations as part of the conversation. And so this book, just flash it up, Laying the Foundation for Local Reparations has been one of the frameworks that we've been talking to and examining. And so with understanding and examining reparations is also about truth. It's about reconciliation, but the part of the reconciliation is about payment, right? Payment in some way, making what was wrong right. And so there's been a lot of emerging models on how to do that locally. And so we've been exploring how we do that locally. And so in some of the conversations around reparations, folks don't have to go as far back as when we were brought here in chains. You go as far back as redlining, and there's a debt to pay. There's a responsibility that cities owe to Black folks as a result of redlining. So we don't even have to go that far back on reparations to get what is owed. So I think that is a part of this current discourse on anti-racism, is exploring a myriad of ideas to move Black folks and to center Blackness moving forward. I think BECMA King Boston has been pretty unapologetic with centering Blackness in our work and really thinking about Black folks, because we've always been, right, the coal miner's canary, right, where Black folks benefit and survive, others thrive. And so we got to start with Black folks, right? Black Lives Matter. And so both of our organizations have been centering Blackness and benefiting the larger community, the larger city, the larger Commonwealth. And so we are working on reparations. I think the link to the Black Mass Coalition's work is in the chat. And so there are a lot of powerful ideas that civic and elected leaders have been working on publicly and behind the scenes. And so I think it's been this two-pronged approach. And I think this is why I've been framing it as and not me, William Barber and Charlotte has been really framing this third reconstruction that we're in, because it is legislative, it is political, and it is economic. And I think it hasn't been as coordinated as we have wanted it to be, but we're getting better at that. And I think panels like this are where sometimes folks who don't know each other connect, and folks who are doing the work either as attendees can get our information, and we can continue doing the work.
We have about 10 minutes, folks, and thank you. We knew that this panel would be informative, helpful, and have the connectedness. And I want to thank William Watkins from the Urban League for putting this panel together and having Dr. Motley and me to be involved with being able to engage all of you in this lunch. I am going to form a question to you. I'm going to hold you to a 2 minutes response because we only have 10 minutes. So I'm not going to do a joy readout piece
And I
in
get
terms
the
of
last
rush to the
two.
last time, and Dr. Motley gets the last word. So the question here is, I can't leave this conversation without saying the role that Stacey Abrams and Black folks around this country made things happen. We elected the president and vice president. We shaped the Senate to give a platform for the advancement of the issues that are here. I want to see what each of you would think, and I'm going to point you one by one, as to how we can take that and how it can help us locally. So I'm going to start with Segun with you. You got 2 minutes and I will cut you off, pull the mic if you go beyond that, and I'm going to do it to each one of you. So,
well, if you don't, if you could, can you rephrase? I'm trying to think of how best to answer that. You said what are the
I want to
issues that
say
you want?
how what happened on the national level, the role that Black folks played with the leadership of Stacey Abrams and others, which helped frame what we're going to be facing with the Biden-Harris administration and going forward in the future. I'm not even going to talk about what happened prior to their coming, but how can we take that and move on the local issues that you and others here are trying to do?
Okay, well, I think what we saw happen on the national level, particularly like Georgia, definitely helped to excite people here in Massachusetts, really here in Boston. There's a lot of people talking now about who is the next Stacey Abrams for Boston with the election coming up right now, and how do we use that momentum and energy and the fact that we're all paying attention to center our agenda. So I think it's going to come around the coalitions that we're talking about coming together to focus on the upcoming elections, and for it not to be on trying to get a particular candidate in office, but to ensure that every candidate is focused on the agenda that we have put together to ensure that whoever is becoming mayor, city councilor, state rep or senator, governor in 2022, right? That they are talking about the issues that matter to us. So I think it's about us coming together and ensuring that whoever is seeking to represent us is answering our issues and making commitments that we can hold them accountable to. I think that might answer your question. If not, I know the others.
It does, and you did it in a great time frame, so I see that I still can control an audience at a time. I'm gonna go to you, Councilor, for the same question and with your response.
Thank you. I agree with coming together. We did it. I think we did it urbanly, put this coalition together, the 1619 project. That was fabulous. I mean, you had people in different, and Boston and Randolph and Brockton running around the towns, making sure that everyone had felt comfortable about voting. And I think that's part of it, also educating people. I know a couple of people doing some voter registration last year and trying to register us to vote. There's still that myth out there that my vote doesn't matter. So we have that work to do. One individual told me, well, I'll come back and register, but let me go home and get right first. And I was like, what does that mean? He was like, well, I got to go home and do some things and I'll come back. So his thought was, I've been in prison, so I can't vote. How do we continue to educate our community about these myths that are out there that you cannot vote? So educating, bringing us together, mimicking the 1619 project, because I also want to say about the 1619 project, we need to continue this. We can't just use it for that one situation. There's so much work that we can do through the 1619 project and bringing folks of color, all folks of common interest in organizations together.
Thank you.
Imari, I'm gonna go to you because I'm gonna leave before Dr. Motley. I'm gonna leave it to the mayor and then to Dr. Motley to close us out. But Imari, you got your 2 minutes here, my good brother.
I'm gonna be quick. Boston is 25% Black, which is twice. And there was a Globe story that came out in October that really talked about the Black experience in Boston. 25% Black is twice the number of other major cities in America. Most major cities teeter from 9 to 11% Black. And so there's already critical mass here for us to assert ourselves in the way that Abrams was really a catalyst for in Georgia. And so I think the emergence of our elected leaders, the emergence of our civic leaders, I think this moment in time has created the landscape for us as Massachusetts and the Commonwealth to be, and I hate to use the new Atlanta, but to be the new Boston in the way that Atlanta wish it could be. And so I
like
think
that.
there's already that momentum here, and it is, will we seize this moment? Can we, to quote the young lady at the inauguration, will we be a part of that light? Will we step into it? And so I'm hoping, and I feel like we are. And we will.
And Madam Mayor, please, your comments, please.
You know, first and foremost, as a mayor, there's a coalition of mayors that have been pushing the agenda's items for quite some time. And then whether it's the African-American mayors across this country or the African-American women across this country, is that we need to keep pressing on these issues around healthcare disparities, social justice, and making sure that we are pushing on that and holding our new administration accountable. Representation does matter, and we're seeing the cabinet that looks like America, and that's a start. Because those, as in the words of Ayanna Presley, those that are closest to the pain need to be closest to the power. And that is so critically correct. You know, and I will say here at the local level, yes, its elections do matter. Representation does matter. And just as the election in Boston is this year, so is the election here in Framingham. And so that is going to matter, and making sure that, one, people organize around and coalesce around a candidate on issues that matter, that are in wanting and pushing them and having those critical conversations. That's going to be important. Galvanize. Because everybody can't be in all these different directions. We've got to galvanize around some critical three, and I like the 3 to 5 points. Don't try to do everything in one full swoop. You can only do so much in so amount of time, but be focused and really be deliberate and mobilize. You can't be too busy. You can't be too busy to register to vote, to get out and actively campaign for a candidate, to get out there and make your voices heard, write letters, pick up phone calls. I will tell you, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. Make noise about what is important to you. And I have seen, even during this pandemic, the noise from the leaders in this state, mayors, town managers, have moved the agenda in this state as it relates to COVID-19. So that is something that is so critically important. I'm gonna say it again: organize, galvanize, and mobilize. That's what we need.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Imari left you some of his time, and you certainly used it well. And so therefore, to you, Dr. Motley.
Listen, we are just so excited. We're so grateful to you for coming together today. You understand the power of our unique opportunity to bring transformative leaders like yourselves together and demonstrate this collective impact, and also our willingness to collaborate with each other. You look so beautiful on the screen as well. You all just have made this a really, really special day for the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts, for our audience, and this will continue to be shared with people as we go forward. I want to thank Charles Stewart, who's been in the chat, sort of keeping information going for us, but I also want to thank you all for understanding how to go back and forth from our questions to the question and answer piece. See, audience, we're getting better at that. I'm not as old school as you thought I was. So I want to thank you all for tuning in. Become a member of the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts. Projects like the 1619 project that doesn't stop and start, it continues. And so, Councilwoman, yes, we have something up our sleeve. In fact, you're going to be asked, Imari's going to be asked, Segun's going to be asked, our mayor's going to be asked to be engaged in that work as we move forward, as in partnership with all of us. Visit our website, www.ulem.org, but also on February 4th, we are going to have our annual meeting event at 6 o'clock. You're going to get a notice about that. It's not going to be the typical annual meeting with just lots of votes and all that stuff. It's going to be an opportunity for you to meet if you haven't met him, but listen to him in a forum like this for our newest president of a health center here in the city, Dr. Charles Anderson, who is the new president of the Demick Center. You know, Demick does more than just stepping out. They step out and into the community with partners like all of us. And so listen, enjoy the rest of your day. We do our best to start on time and finish on time. So to my guests, who are not guests, to our partners, thank you. It's 1 o'clock. Enjoy. Take care.